Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. My name is Anthony and I'm the Canadian watchmaker, and in this video here I'm going to cover a few topics from oil to oilers, how to prepare them, how to clean them and get them ready to oil a watch, and then also how to do some oiling on a watch, whether we're applying oil or grease, and some of the do's and don'ts and best practices with that. So if you like this, please give me a thumbs up and please subscribe. And if you're looking for something more in depth than what I cover here, I have started a Patreon channel. So it's going to cover the topics. I'm doing a video later on tonight, and that's going to be released on my Patreon channel. There's some other videos there right now also, but it's basically going to cover the same topics that we're covering here, but much more in depth. I see a lot of videos that are out there, and I just wanted to put one out to show how I oil a watch and how I was taught and how I learned how to do this, and the reasons why everything is done. But then there's also some other reasons that I'm going to go over in my Patreon channel, and something a little bit more in depth. So back to where we are here. I also drew some diagrams, so something a little bit larger scale so it's easy to see. And also in this video I'm going to have, like I said, some snapshots under my microscope just to give everybody some references as to what to look out for. So basically, you've probably heard me say this before in the past. The two things that a watchmaker fights the most is magnetism and dust. So in continuing on, if there's some hobbyist watchmakers that are out there, you've already got the cleaning down of your watch, or you're just starting to learn and you're just trying to learn through repetition, and oiling is definitely one of those things. Practice makes perfect, and I remember when I was being helped out by a watchmaker, they had me service a watch, they looked at it, they gave me a little bit of input. Okay, do it again and again and again. The watch was back into the cleaning machine, and away I would go. If you're looking to practice this, there is ways that you could do it without having to clean a watch all the time. You can clean it real quick with Rodico and learn, as long as the watch is really, really clean. If you're just practicing, you don't have to continuously, put it through the cleaning machine and things like that. You could just learn exactly how to collect the oil, how to deposit it, and sort of do a quality control yourself. But first off, when it comes to the oilers here, I have 3 oilers. And what I had to do with these ones here, or what I was advised to do, which I thought was great, was to prepare the oiler for the oiling. So I have an Arkansas stone here, and I think I'll use the large one here. You'll probably see on the reflection there that it's got a high polish on there. So very, very gently, what you want to do is on an Arkansas stone, for example, like this, very gently. You don't want to press too hard because you're going to snap off the end of the oiler. Is you want to prep the side of the oiler like this, both sides, to get them high polished. And what this is going to do also is help the oil bead off, and also when you're collecting, it'll help with that. The other thing is when these oilers are manufactured, sometimes there's some jagged ends. If you look at the end of these on loop, with the loop, you'll see some little jagged ends on there. So you also want to sort of polish or round off the ends like this on an Arkansas stone to get them nice and round, because if you leave them with the points, if you look at these a little bit closer, they have some points on there and they could actually scratch, and you don't want them to scratch any of the jewels or anything like that. So you do want to prepare them a little bit like that. So we get a couple of different sizes here. I have been using these for a while. One, I have a slight curve to it for when I'm oiling the pallet fork jewels, and it's just sort of a preference of mine to get to a particular angle when I'm doing a watch to do the jewels. But back to collecting the oil. Again, one of the things that's very, very emphasized in the world of watchmaking is the ability to eliminate dirt or dust or anything. So I actually have a video on my Patreon, what I do before I service a watch. So a watch has come out of the cleaning machine. I'm prepping everything on my bench. What do I go through and what do I do? So you want to eliminate all the dust. My workshop is mopped often, just to try and create to get rid of as much dust as possible. I don't wear shoes in my workshop, so everything is left at the door and things like that. The other thing is I have a brand new oiler that's a yellow like this that I use exclusively for collecting the oil out of the oil cups, and it's cleaned really, really well when I'm going from one oiler to the next, because contamination is really, really big. You don't want to contaminate anything with dust or anything like that, or the oils, because one, when the oil is contaminated, it does lower its function. Okay, it can potentially lower its function, and then also it's lowering the service interval. So that's one thing that you're going to see. A lot of the things that we cover in oiling, especially, it's to preserve the quality of the workmanship is to preserve a service interval of around 5 to 7 years. So if the oiling is not done properly, if the cleaning is not done properly, this all contributes to a diminished service interval. And then actually there are some other things that can happen, but that I go through on my Patreon channel. So for example, I've seen a lot of people in the past, if a watch isn't cleaned, they just add oil to it. The watch does start running, but there are hazards in doing that to the watch in the future if the watch isn't cleaned. So I go through that a little in more detail on my Patreon channel. Now I have individual cups here. There's some different ones that you can get. These are made by Bergeron here, but there's different cups that you can get, and I prefer them where they have individual lids like this. And you'll notice if you're watching some of my service videos, excuse me, and I'm oiling, you hear a lot of clicking like this, and that's me. What you want to do is you want to eliminate or minimize the amount of time that these oil cups are open. The more that they're open, the more they could be contaminated from dust and things getting in. Now, when you're collecting the oil, that'll be something of a skill that's just going to come with time. There are some best practices when it comes to collecting oil or grease, depending on which one that you use. But one of the general rules is when you put the oiler into the oil, the oil sort of creates a meniscus, right? So you have the oil cup that goes down, and then you have the oil that's filled in there. When you take the oiler out quickly, you actually collect more oil. When you take the oil out slowly, you collect less oil. Now, the other thing that you want to watch is the angle of when you're entering the oil into the meniscus of the oil. Okay, if you expose, for example, if this oiler here is something a little bit larger to see, if this is the top of the oil here, if you lower the oiler this way, you could see the surface contact from the bottom of the oiler to the stone here is more. So more of the oil is going to collect along the top of the oiler through here. Okay, if it's just the tip on the underneath side, then it's something like this. Okay, if you enter it this way, you're actually going to get oil on both sides. So one of the best practices that I've been taught is I usually collect the oil from the tip, right where so if this was the oil inside the oil cup, it's right from the tip here. That way it's on the lower side and it's only on the bottom of the oiler. It can't go up higher on the oiler because there's no oil there. Okay, so that's one of the best ways that I've found to collect the oil, and one way that I've been taught. So it's just to catch the corner of the oil like that. Okay, that way it's on the bottom side and it's down. Now, There are lots of videos out there. I'm not going to go into too much detail in this particular video as to which oil to use for which component of the watch. That's something that I'll cover off a little bit later on. I wanted to show also here, now you do see as I have here preparation, I have some Rutico that's here, and I have some pithwood. This is a softer pithwood, but what I actually like to use is something like this one here. This is a much more dense pithwood, and I find it cleans off the oilers much better, and it very, very rarely leaves any sort of dust or any small fragments of the pithwood on the oiler. Okay, so this is something that everybody could look at. You just sort of tap the end in there because we're not getting too much oil on the oiler from there. So we've gone over some oil cups. Like I said, individual oil cups, you want to open it, collect the oil, close it, and keep that minimal. You don't want to put a lot of oil in here because, again, when you're oiling watches, a little bit is actually more. If you oil a watch too much, it's not very good for the timing, and it's considered poor workmanship, but I'll go into that a little bit more on my Patreon channel. But I just created a diagram here that I wanted to show everybody, just to give everybody a reference, and then I'm also taking some pictures, like I said, under my microscope. So we're gonna go over that. So here I have a diagram that I did up. I hope I can get it into focus here, just to show what's going on. So in this particular diagram, this is the overhead or the top look of a jewel. So we have the plate here, the brass plate. So this is the top part of the jewel, which is usually this part here. And then we have the part that curves down, which is the oil, where the oil cup is, right about there. And then we have a little bit of space for the side shake, and then we have the pinion. So in this particular diagram here, I have sort of an illustration here of this is the pivot with the pinion, and this is the jewel. So I'm showing here in the black exactly how much oil needs to be deposited in there. I prefer these kind of diagrams. I hope everybody likes these. Took me a little bit of time to draw them up, but I can understand a little bit better when I see something of the scale. But then I also, like I said, I have got some shots of what the oil is going to look like in just a moment. So this is the amount of oil that you want to deposit. Now, most of the time, not all the time, halfway up the pivot is halfway up the jewel, the oil cup in the jewel. But in this particular case, it isn't that case, and I wanted to emphasize that. So you really have to look at each particular jewel and each particular pivot to see how much oil you're going to put in there, and that'll determine which oiler you use. So this is in one of the preps that I go through before I start oiling a watch. After inspecting all the jewels after they come out of the cleaning machine, I sort of see the sizes that I'm working with, and I get the appropriate oilers ready. So when I'm collecting the oil, right, if I let's use this yellow here, for example. This way I could show a little bit better. So when I'm collecting the oil, I want to enter the oil cup. Actually, I have something here a little bit larger. Give me one sec. It's a little bit better. It's a little bit larger. So I want to enter the oil cup from the side like this, and I want to collect the oil on the underneath side and only at the tip. So if I enter just at the edge of where the oil is in the oil cup, sort of where the meniscus is there, I could collect it just on the tip. So then when I'm entering the oil, when I'm depositing the oil in the oil jewel, I want to have it so it enters like this. Okay, so some people prefer to do it where the oil goes up against the pivot, and some people prefer to do it where the oil goes down towards the jewel. I like it towards the jewel. Okay, and I'll tell you why. If the oil is only in the tip and you have the correct size, it's okay to get oil on the side of the pivot, obviously, but you don't want to get any oil here, which would be this surface area here, and you don't want to get any oil on the top of the pivot. Okay, if you oil the top of the pivot, it's not going to take away or do anything. It's just considered poor workmanship. But you want to deposit the oil going in this way. Okay, now we could see here on this diagram, I have some black dots that are here, and sort of this here as a piece of hair that's in the jewel. Now, 9 times out of 10, at the beginning when I was cleaning watches, I didn't go near a cleaning machine for a year. I was taught to clean a watch by hand. And the reasons for that is I couldn't really audit or double check that the cleaning machines don't clean watches 100%. Even with a pre-clean, you have to make sure that they're okay when they leave the cleaning machine. So all of the watches here get a pre-clean, then an inspection, and then a full cleaning. So for a year of my life, I cleaned every watch by hand. That way, I completely understood exactly what a cleaned watch was supposed to look like. That way, when it comes out of the cleaning machine, I could say, okay, I could sort of give a quality control. I could say that the watch is cleaned and we're good to go. Now, a lot of the times at the beginning, this was something that I saw very consistently in my watches. So I'm sure a lot of people are probably witnessing this also. And once I got a microscope, I saw it more. Little pieces of dots like this, like little pieces of dust, maybe just a little lint and pieces of dirt through here once I started to clean the watches. Or if I was working on a watch and I left it overnight, I covered it, I come back to it, I look at the oil the next day, and I've oiled some of the watch already, boom, I started to see that. Okay, so there is sort of a best practice that I went into to eliminate that. That I'm going to go through a little bit more in depth in my Patreon channel, but this is one of the things you want to look out for, because this debris in the oil will diminish your service interval. Okay, so as you could see here, oiling is very, very important. Now, if we're oiling the correct amount here, right, and we're making sure everything is clean here, one particular area that we do not want to get oil on is on the top part of the jewel through here, which would be this area here. And that's probably the one thing that I see the most if I get some watches in and they say they've been oiled before, or if just some people that I was helping out in the past and sort of looking at some things, this is the one area where you see the most there. And it actually affects the service interval, because with the capillary reaction of oil, the oil, when it hits corners, right, oil gets drawn away and it moves towards corners. So if this is the corner here and there's oil here, the oil is going to be drawn away, especially to the dirt. Also, it gets drawn away to the dirt if it's not clean. But if you get oil on the surface here, the oil is actually going to be drawn away and it's going to run the pivot dry, or potentially run the pivot dry, which brings your service interval down. Now, there are some other long-term effects, which I'm going to go over in my Patreon channel, of what to watch out for and the reason why you don't want to oil a watch incorrectly. But that's one of the things that you see here. So I'm just going to pop out now, or not pop out, I'm just going to show a couple of examples right now of some jewels and what to look at. And it's something under a microscope. So for a lot of people, if you haven't got a microscope, you want to get a really good loupe, something a little bit more powerful, you know, like a 10 or 15 times loupe. And this is one of the things that really is in your hands as far as quality control goes. But then also, if you're buying a watch and it says that it has been serviced, this is one of the things that you could check for, you know, just to make sure that everything is done properly for you. So I'll be back in just a moment, and we're going to show some of those jewels right now. So here I'm showing a picture of a jewel believe it or not, that after it's been cleaned and it's sat under a glass for some time, with the environment, just a regular cleaning, and how much dust can accumulate over time if your work environment is not kept clean. And this is actually before oiling. So you can see how something gets a little bit dirty from there. So here we could see the exact same jewel after it's been cleaned and oil has been applied to it. So the oil is in the center. You could see a slight reflection there next to, just below the pinion there. And the oil is going up halfway up the pinion, but it's still staying within the oil cup, which is very, very important. You can see there's no small particles of debris or anything, and there's no oil on the outside of the jewel, which could run the jewel dry. So in this example here, we could see where something has been cleaned, but it hasn't been oiled properly. So here we could see directly at 6 o'clock below the pivot that's there, on the outside of the jewel, there's oil that's there. So whoever's been oiling has missed the oil cup. And then there's also oil around sort of the top of the oil cup. So this has a potential of drawing the oil away from the pivot and having the pivot run dry. So yeah, you could see there just with some of those, some of the jewels, it's very, very important that one, the jewel is kept clean. And like I said, if you have a microscope, it's something you want to use often because you'll be very, very surprised how, and I've learned this over the years myself through trial and error, how everything seems really, really clean, but dust always seems to find a way to find its way and sort of just attract to oil. And you really want to make sure that everything is kept clean. Now, the other thing that I wanted to talk about is oiling some posts, okay? And I wanted to use this oiler here as an example. So say we have an intermittent wheel on the keyless works, okay? So in that, one of the few times that I would collect the oil, where I would actually put the oiler in this way, okay? I want oil on both sides of the oiler. That's because when I'm rotating the oil around the post, if this is the post here, I want to make sure that I get oil on both sides of the oiler. That way, when I oil the post, it's being oiled all the way around. Now, when you're oiling a post like this, you want to make sure that the oil is deposited about 3/4 the way up, okay? Or on the top, you want to make sure that it's oiled on the top 1/3, okay? You don't want to oil it halfway down. You don't want to oil it all the way down to the bottom, and I'll tell you why. When you put the wheel on top of this and you press it down, the wheel itself is going to move the oil down the post, okay? So for example, if we oil it down here at the bottom and we put the wheel on top, it's not good, because then the oil starts to get down through the bottom and it pushes it down, especially if you oiled way too much, okay? The other thing, if we're oiling something like a yoke, say for example, this is a yoke through here. When you're collecting the oil, this is one of the times where I would collect the oil, and I would actually collect it on the side near the edge of where the oil gets to the oil cup, so it's only on the tip on one side, okay? And then you would oil the side of the yoke like this, or the setting lever on the side, okay? You don't want to get any oil on the top part of anything. And one of the key things to remember is when you're oiling a watch, you want to very rarely use any rub off on it. The rub off, you just want to stay away from it. It can leave a residue on the movement and things like that. So you just want to make sure once the watch is cleaned, you do everything in your power to make sure the dust and everything stays clean from there. So I hope this helps. like I said, I'm gonna do another video a little bit more in depth in my Patreon channel. But please, if you like this video, please like it, subscribe, and I hope this sort of gives everybody a quick little reference, together with the photos and some large diagrams that I have here, exactly the amount of oil, how to collect the oil, and prep the oilers from there. Well, thanks again, and I hope to talk to you soon in the next video.